Welcome to Comms First. This is session 164, Cleaning Up After COVID. Our speaker is Torrin Manson. And Torrin, you can start whenever you like. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, as the case may be for you. I'm excited to be here today for my second presentation of the day. It's been a long one so far, about 12 hours of taking in the session, so I hope you're enjoying everything that's going on. I normally talk about voice topics around Teams and Skype for Business, and I wanted to switch things up and do something a bit different and share some of the challenges and solutions that my clients are facing as they're dealing with Skype for Business and Teams and how they handle the COVID situation. So a little bit about me. I'm Torrin Manson. I'm an MVP for Office Apps and Services. I've got a bunch of certifications. I volunteer in some user groups. I live in a little town of 100,000 or so people called Kamloops in British Columbia, Canada. And a fun fact, we are technically in a desert area here. It actually does get really hot in some places in Canada. Huge thank you to all of the sponsors. They are really key to putting the show on, and please do make sure that you visit them in their booths and ask all of the technical questions and really take advantage of the fact that they are there to answer your questions, take your feedback, and help you out in any way that they can. So when I was originally trying to figure out what I wanted to call the session, I was thinking about, we could call it, what do we do now? Or what a mess we've made, or that wasn't on our roadmap until 2023. What do you mean it's implemented already? Or where's Control Z? How do I undo this? So really this is about cleaning up after COVID, or not necessarily after COVID, but after what's happened to IT as IT and businesses responded to COVID. So the situation before for most organizations was probably one of planning, I think, in the Microsoft world. So if you were running Skype for Business online, you were maybe looking at making your way to Teams, or maybe started making your way there already. A lot of organizations are still running Skype for Business on premises, and they were either making their way to Teams or planning on how to do that in a post Skype for Business online world after July 2021. Others were already deploying Teams and using it to varying degrees. A general approach that I've seen a lot is collaboration first, switch over the meetings, the IM, and whatnot, and then voice is kind of the last thing to go over. Before COVID hit, VPNs were cool, and a lot of organizations would have you VPN into the enterprise if you were working from home or remotely. Within the enterprise, hub and spoke centralized internet were perfectly acceptable things. And then this thing called COVID comes along, and we're supposed to keep, is that an eagle's wingspan apart, or 6 feet apart, and we've got exams at universities taking place in hockey stadiums, and warning signs here in Canada to keep the length of a hockey stick away from each other. And this radically changed how we work because we couldn't go into the office. And so people wound up working from home, or not working from home, but trying to live where they worked and work where they lived, and it was all a bit of a mess. An organization that I work with had about 125 Skype for Business servers pre-COVID, and had to very, very rapidly scale that to over 200 Skype for Business servers to be able to meet the demand that they saw. People couldn't just walk down the hallway and have a conversation with someone else or get together in a meeting room. They had to do everything online. Bandwidth was scaled up, phone lines were added. We saw healthcare go online. We saw court and legal proceedings have gone online, which in my area is something really new to them. If there's an organization that's really stuck in probably the 60s or the 70s as far as their communications go, it's our court system that we've got here. And we saw schools and education tried to go online. as far as curriculum delivery goes anyway. Certainly the social and the play aspects couldn't really do that. And we saw some challenges with this. There's all kinds of stories about Zoom bombing going on, about teachers being disconnected from the meeting, and a student is automatically promoted to the meeting owner, and hilarity ensues until the instructor comes back online. And so Teams was deployed, Zoom was deployed, WebEx was deployed, everything was deployed, everything was stressed, everybody was stressed. In my area, we had governments relaxing a bunch of privacy and governance requirements on a temporary basis. In Canada, it's generally frowned upon from a legal perspective if you're a government organization or related to the government to store data in the US. And many enterprises, while it's legal to store data in the US, will choose not to. So a bunch of those regulations were relaxed, specifically around Zoom. Users wound up working from wherever they could on whatever work surface was available. Had an employee of an organization that I was working with, her partner was a lawyer and was giving legal advice to a client on his Teams meeting, and she got booted out of their apartment onto their patio in the middle of a rainstorm in Vancouver to continue on with our video conference. So these are the kind of situations that our users are winding up in. Users are competing with their spouses, their children, their roommates for space and bandwidth. So now what do we do, given that we sort of have a handle on how we're supposed to behave? We're settling into kind of the new normal of what's acceptable in working from home, with children and pets barging in, and all of these side conversations that will come up as we try and work around everyone trying to live and work where we are. So I wanted to talk about a bunch of key considerations around that. So staff working conditions, training for staff, compliance around temporary solutions that were put in place. I want to talk about the retirement of Skype for Business Online at the end of July next year, about a year away, and what that means as we kind of pick up the pieces of technology and move forward. Skype for Business on premises and the network, and how suitable is this now to the task where everyone is a remote user instead of an on-prem user? How are people adapting to an asynchronous work style? We're no longer necessarily meeting or having these core hours where we're getting together live, because that's just not possible, because people can't, because they've got to work from their patio in the middle of a rainstorm. We'll touch a bit on licensing, and then Teams governance, and a little bit of cleanup. So staff working conditions. Staff who are working from home are in tough spots. They might not have a desk, they might not have privacy, they might have some really poor gear. Working with an organization who had Skype for Business, or who has Skype for Business, and is reporting call quality issues and working through the quality reports. A lot of the issues that I found when we were looking at reports from users who had reported a bad experience, there was things going on like shouting at their laptops and not using a headset, or using their consumer earbuds kind of thing, and not a certified device. So the certified device gets them that call quality, the wideband clear experience, but generally also gets you really good noise cancellation. There's some children playing outside in the next yard over, and my window is open, and I doubt you can hear them because I've done these sound checks before, because these kids are always outside playing, and I've checked with people before just to make sure, can you hear them? Do you ever hear them? And the report is typically no, and I can absolutely hear them standing here in my office. Some organizations have gone ahead and started purchasing furniture and gear for their work from home staff. Drop ship some IKEA furniture directly to them, or Walmart or Amazon, or whatever you can to get them a bit of a desk to work on, to get them some sort of a headset, although they've been in short supply. That's starting to alleviate a bit. So on some of these slides, I've thrown in a call to action at the bottom. And the call to action on this for the staff working conditions is for you to sort out those gaps that are affecting your staff's ability to work effectively from home, and prioritize those and begin to address them. So focus on those most immediate things, like if someone doesn't have a desk and they're working on their couch or their bed with a laptop, that's okay for a couple of hours while you're finishing up a report, but you don't want to be doing that for 40 hours a week. You're going to be in physiotherapy or something before too long. The plan doesn't need to be complete and immediate, but it needs to be a plan, and staff need to know how they can access it and see that there's some sort of a progress happening to help them, and it will de-stress many of them and just alleviate some of that concern about how am I going to make this work. There are a lot of back to office power apps that are available now that will snap into Teams or SharePoint that will allow you to book or control the number of people that are returning into the office environment to make sure that you're not violating those health guidelines that you have, to make sure, give them the reminders about health check-ins and help them understand what procedures are in place now should they need to go into the office. If you search for back to office in Bing, you will find at least 3 in the top 4 or 5 results. There's a number of them that are out there. So training, we've thrust all of these new and different solutions onto our staff, and they've not had very much training at all, honestly, from some of the things that I've seen in not just how to use the tools, but how to use the tools effectively. There's a difference between knowing how to start a meeting or book a meeting in Skype for Business and Teams, and how to effectively run through a virtual meeting versus a physical in an office meeting. There's some differences there that if you coach your staff through those, they'll have a better experience than if they were expecting to figure that out on their own. So this doesn't just affect your staff, but it affects everyone that your staff works with. So if you're in education, your staff or your teachers, this also affects your students. If you're in healthcare, this affects patients. If you're in the legal field, this affects clients and possibly even legal rights of those clients, right to a fair and speedy trial, for example. So there's a call to action here, and that's to make accessible independent training available as best as you can, and to keep those subjects for the training small. Small subjects and content. That's a bit poorly worded, I guess. So as not to overwhelm the users. They've got enough going on. They just need some little nuggets, some snacks, some coffee break lessons to learn these little bits to gradually improve their work scenario. If you search Teams training, you'll find plenty of Microsoft resources. And then there's also the adoption tool site on the Microsoft website. And this URL, don't panic or worry about screenshotting this or taking a picture of it. The presentation will be posted as soon as I'm done. It'll be loaded up into the presentation folder for download. In terms of compliance, we've seen governments relax regulations around privacy, but usually on a temporary basis. And some of those have already expired in my area. And so organizations are asking the government, can we get extensions here? Like, what do we do now? We went ahead and we started using Zoom, and now we're all dependent on Zoom, but everything's in the US. And so we're not allowed to do that now. What do we do? So your call to action here is to identify those areas where you're not compliant, i.e. your data is in the US, you aren't encrypting something end-to-end, whatever that case may be. Then once you've got those gaps identified, make a plan to return to compliance. As long as you've got a roadmap, you'll be able to focus your organization, come up with plans on what you need to do. And if anyone from government regulatory bodies comes along and starts asking, hey, why are you still using this? You can at least show them a roadmap going, hey, this is what we had to do to ensure healthcare delivery to our patients. We are 25% of the way towards repatriating this data and these services to Canada. Resources again, those Teams adoption resources from the previous page. And also there's a link here. It says security on the end, but it's really about security and compliance aspects of Teams. So I guess probably a number of years ago now, or a couple of years ago now, it was announced that the Skype for Business online end of service date would be July 31st, 2021. I saw a lot of organizations who had Skype for Business server that couldn't afford the hardware or couldn't get the bandwidth or didn't have the data center space, quickly migrated a bunch of users to Skype for Business Online to gain more resources and alleviate some of the load. They're now facing the question of, what do I do with this? I've got a year until the service goes away. I really wasn't planning on getting these users onto Teams. You know, kind of help is what they've said to me. And at the same time, not only is that Skype for Business Online service going away, but there's an impact there on hybrid availability, your Skype for Business hybrid with Skype for Business Online and with Teams that allows you to do your user migrations, to do a split domain. So contoso.com is online and on premises. And your on-premises call handling so that those Skype for Business Online users get their telephony service connected to the telco through your on-premises infrastructure. That's all going to be affected by this retirement. So there's really two options here, and I'll even narrow it down more and say there's probably only really one good option, and that's to move forward to Teams. You could fall back to Skype for Business on premises, and that certainly alleviates the issue of Skype for Business Online retiring in about a year. But that doesn't really move your organization forward. It just kind of gets you back to where you were. And really, what I think we need to be doing here is moving forward. I've posted a link here that's got a lot of really good resources and information around that Skype for Business Online retirement. Skype for Business on-prem suitability and requirements. One of the reasons on the previous slide I was saying you probably don't want to go back to Skype for Business on premises is that the Skype for Business on-prem infrastructure is really designed around your users being on premises and accessing that front end pool over your local area networks or your wide area network, and not having 100% or 75% of your users connected into it remotely. We have a word for that. It's called the cloud. So moving back to Skype for Business on premises doesn't make sense. And these organizations that are doing this massive scaling of Skype for Business, I still wonder whether that makes sense as a longer term solution or whether that's just the immediate stopgap that they could do. It's a lot easier to have your technical resources spin up some new servers than it is to start moving users to Teams and all the adoption and change management parts that go along with that. There's a lot of organizations that are struggling with stressed resources around this. Lots of edge stability issues out there because edge pools and other edge infrastructure like reverse proxies and load balancers and firewalls weren't sized for really large edge pools for that 75 to 100% of your users being remote. Some quick hits if you've got to stay on Skype for Business on premises for a while. enable split tunneling so that your traffic bypasses a VPN. VPNs will cause your traffic to do really weird paths going across to your Skype for Business servers and back out to other users and add all kinds of latency that will affect your call quality. I worked with a global organization that still had VPNs turned on for an awful lot of their Skype for Business users, and their call quality report was just yellow and red. And over the course of a week, they were able to implement a split tunnel to bypass the VPN for their Skype for Business environment, and everything dropped down to, well, it didn't drop down to green because things aren't colored green, but the only instances of yellow issues were those really long trans-Pacific connections to some really poorly connected sites that are acceptable to them. That's about the best they can do there. Quality of service. If you don't have it deployed and you're going to have Skype for Business server around for a while, yes, you should be deploying this, even with 75 to 100% of your users being remote. Though more specifically, the legs that you need to focus on is that edge outwards toward the internet. So your edge server on the outside of that towards your firewall should be prioritized. It should also be prioritized into your front end pools. Review that edge and the related infrastructure. Is your firewall just being redlined by the number of users that you have driving traffic through it? Do you need to get a bigger firewall? And a direct connection to the internet for all offices for those who have returned, so that when you do start making your migration online, they've got that direct access. But also, if you set up users in your on-premises organization with direct access to the internet from their office, they can establish media to external users, if there's one and they're doing a peer-to-peer conversation, directly out their firewall and directly over the internet to that other user, and alleviate some of that load from those edge servers. Turning away from technology now, working asynchronously. When we're in an office and we're working kind of 8 till 5 or 9 till 5 or whatever your hours of work might be, you're working at the same time. You're chatting either online or wandering down the hallway to where your coworkers are sitting. You're working on that document at the same time. You're getting together in the meeting room to discuss something. You're putting it up on the projector or up on the screen in the meeting room to have a look at it. With Teams, you've got the exceptional ability now to work asynchronously. So you're not working at the same time, but you are collaborating. You've got your pre-meeting experience where you can have a chat conversation about the agenda. You can post any documents that need to be discussed before a meeting. You can have the meeting, you can record it for reference for anyone who couldn't make it to the actual live meeting. And then afterwards, all of the resources are still there in the team. You can co-edit the document, you can put those updates in there, you can turn on track changes, and gone is the kind of the workaround of emailing a bunch of documents of different versions around to everybody and losing everything in your Outlook inbox. So there's a bit of a shift in how we can work, whether we're in the office or out of the office, and how we can adapt to these different times of working if we're not doing the 9 to 5. A couple of houses down from me, our neighbors are both work from home, and their young kids need someone to look after them. And at this point, one of them is working from 4 a.m. until noon, and then the other works from noon until 8 p.m. So their two organizations are being very flexible in how they're allowing those people to work asynchronously with their team. So the call to action here, stop me if you've heard this before, is really Teams. It's one of the reasons why we're all here at this conference is to hear about Teams, because it really does address a lot of these issues and provide us a lot of solutions where earlier solutions like Skype for Business can't quite address that asynchronous working. Slack sort of can, Zoom sort of can, and you can maybe mash them together, but then they're not the integrated solution that Teams is. When you do need those core hours and you do need those people to be working together live, use the tools and the technology to allow them to be responsible staff members and set those schedules. And the number 1 and 2 tools that I see for this are Outlook calendars and the Find Time app. Find Time is normally something that you would use with people outside of your organization. You would pick your 4 or 3 times that work for you for a meeting and send them off to them and say, hey, which of these work? And you can vote, yes, that works. No, that doesn't work. And aha, this is my most favorite time. Well, why can't you use this inside your own organization for that person who generally works 4 a.m. until noon? Give them the option to say, yeah, I can maybe do a switch around here and I can join this meeting at 2 in the afternoon because that works best for everyone else. Train the users on how to use chats and the channel and file storage and those edit habits to facilitate this asynchronous working that I described with that pre-meeting and the meeting and the post-meeting experience. Get rid of this habit of just throwing files onto a drive and emailing them around. And the last point in here is to make sure that the users get the ability to shut their work off. Teams has some great features specifically on the mobiles for working hours. And then when your working hours start up again, it'll let you know that there is activity. Surprise. Every morning at 7 a.m., my phone lets me know that there's been activity in Teams, and there's not a weekday morning when it doesn't tell me that there has been activity. But make sure they get that time to actually put work down so that they're not confusing work as an activity and that work as a location in their home isn't impacting themselves and their family life. Licenses are all over the place right now for every organization that I work with. They're rapidly adding additional licenses, especially if anything's online where they can just, click an ad or call their CSP and have the licenses added. So it's important to circle back and have a look at these and make sure that you're not over provisioned and that you're not under provisioned. But as well, have a look at things like calling plans where you're able to pool your minutes between your users that are on that same plan within that country. They usually come in a small and a large. In Canada, they are 300 minutes and 3,000 minutes or something like that, or 150 and 3,000. Have a look at those, pull those reports and go, wow, 3,000 minutes a month for all of these users is a lot. And so many people are online and having online meetings that they're not actually placing phone calls anymore. I can bump 75% of my users down to this lower license level and still not go over. Maybe I can bump more of my users down to that lower license level because of this pooling aspect. Dial-in conferencing is an add-on for some licensing. Pull up these reports and have a look at which users are actually using dial-in conferencing to have users dial into their meetings. It's a couple of bucks a month, but you times that by a couple of hundred users or a couple of thousand users a month who aren't having people dial into their meetings, and maybe that's funding that you can allocate elsewhere. So a bit about cleanup within teams around channels and governance. There's been a lot of rapid deployment of teams for collaboration without a lot of the best practices in place around naming standards and who can create teams and what the access to those teams is in terms of, are they private, are they public, are they accessible by guests? It's really all over the map when you look at organizations. So get those controls in place and those naming standards and that access now. When you have a look at this, watch the licensing requirements. There are some Azure AD P1 requirements that you may not be aware of for that. Turn on those expiry policies. So when a team is inactive or after a certain amount of time, the team owner gets a notification, hey, this team is inactive. Do you still want it? Do you want to renew it? Or do you want it just to be just to be tossed out. This is a lot like the Netflix, hey, are you still watching? Because it hasn't heard from you for a while. I have a customer who is in education, and they've got a hard compliance date in that students have access into these teams and the content that's in there, and they need to ensure that the student access is supervised. Where do teachers go over the summer? Not to work. So who's supervising the students who still have access? And they're looking at these and they're going, maybe these aren't the teams and the channels and the structure that we wanted anyway. So let's just archive everything. And then if the team owners really did need those teams, they can go ahead as the team owner and unarchive them. So there's an organization that's going through that process. They have about 12,000 teams that are being archived. There's a really great resource out there called Request a Team. And what it is a workflow for someone who wants a team created, and gives you a bit of a balance between you've got to open a ticket with the help desk to have a team created and the free-for-all. So the user goes, they put all the information into a form that they would normally use to create the team, but it goes through a workflow to be approved in order to be created. So this is really helpful for kind of resetting the habits of how teams are created. And then as well, there's a link there to some planning and governance resources around teams. And my final slide here is more of a general call to action. And what it is it revolves around being bold. You may have seen a cartoon that was in the keynote earlier today, and it's certainly been floating around on the internet in a couple of different formats, which is generally, who's driving your modernization processes and your digital transformation at your company. And there's, the COVID wrecking ball coming in to smack the side of the building, or the multiple choices are the CFO is, or the CTO is, or COVID-19 is, and COVID's been circled because COVID is causing all of these changes. So if this is your reality and COVID is driving things, take those reins back and start leading the process proactively. So done right, the disruption to your users that would happen anyway, and to your organization that is happening anyway, can take you down a positive path that will leave you in a better, stronger place when the dust from all of this settles. So lay out your plans of where you want to be. Engage Microsoft, engage your partners, engage the community resources available to you, like this conference, to assist you in that planning and to come up with a real action plan to get you there. Take advantage of any program or offer that could possibly move you down your path. If Microsoft suddenly releases a program that gets you a bunch of assistance for moving to Exchange Online and you're not there yet, take advantage of that. Get to Exchange Online so that you could take advantage of that and the additional features and functions and capabilities that are there for you. So be bold, take those reins back, and lead your organization in those processes. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I would very much appreciate your feedback at the goteams.fan/survey link, and this is session 164. And we have some time now for Q&A before I will be available in the breakout room for more interactive fireside Q&A.
Thank you, Torin. There are no questions in the Q&A box at the moment, so I'll give a couple of minutes in case anybody has anything they want to add. I will also put the link to the post-session networking here also in the Q&A box so that it's easy for you guys to click on it. All right, well, I think that's done there. I think they're saving their questions for the private networking session. So thank you very much for attending today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everyone.